Hey, good afternoon, future problem solvers. Thanks so much for joining in this afternoon as we continue exploring Microsoft MakeCode. So if you didn't catch us last week we went over an arcade shooter style game in Microsoft MakeCode. So if you want to go ahead and you can check out those replays on our YouTube channel or over on Facebook. If you follow us there, you can check out the live stream from last week and watch it and see what we did last week. Today, we're going to create another full game in Microsoft MakeCode. We're going to do it from start to finish, and we're going to do a chase the pizza game. And so what we're going to do is set up a timer, and we're going to make our character move around the screen and chase a randomly displaying pizza that's showing up on the screen. So we'll go ahead and jump in and get started. If you have your browser open like this, the easiest way to get to MakeCode is just look into, just search for Microsoft MakeCode and choose the first link that shows up. That's the one we're looking for. Or you can go to makecode.com. That will redirect you to Microsoft's site for their MakeCode tool. All right, so just like last week, we're going to go in the arcade version of MakeCode. Right down here, the kind of pink background with the retro gaming device. And we are going to create a new project. I've already gone through this. You can give the project whatever name that you want. We are going to be chasing a pizza around the screen. So I can call mine Pizza Chase. You can do the same thing if you'd like that, or call it whatever you want. This is your game. I'm going to create another browser window to come down here for me. Okay, so once this shows up in Microsoft MakeCode, we see the little gaming device over on our left. That's our workspace. That's where things show up once we add the code for that. And then over here on the right, this is where we're actually dropping the code, telling our computer what to do. Again, I'll say this every week because I think it's important. All we're doing when we're coding is we're giving instructions to the computer. Okay, we're telling the computer what to do. We're telling them when they need to do that thing that we're telling them to do. And so that's what the computer is going to do, and that's what we're going to be doing when we make this game today. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is set the background color of our game. So we're going to open up the scene code blocks in the middle. And there's one that says set background color to, and it has a little gray oval next to that. So drag that over and put it inside of this on start. And that's something that I hadn't really noticed before, but it's actually a really cool feature for MakeCode. When I was hovering over this with my little grab hand, it tells me run the code when the program starts. So this is letting me know if that on start green block wasn't indicative enough, then this little prompt or this little tooltip that comes up that shows you this code inside of this block is going to be run whenever we start the program. So I want you to change the background color. You can choose whichever color you want. You may have to modify it based on when you draw your character in a moment, because if your character matches something on the background, then they're probably going to like blend in and not show up for you. So we'll change that maybe when we add the character in just a moment if you need to. So once you have your background color chosen, we are going to create a new sprite. So a sprite is a character or something else that we're using to give code to in our game. That's the same terminology that's used in Scratch. So Sprite. So in the Sprites block in the middle, this very top one says set my sprite to Sprite. And it has this gray block of kind player. Remember, Microsoft MakeCode, especially the arcade version, takes care of a lot of things for us because it knows that this sprite is my main player, right? If we check this little drop-down list over on the right, we see that we can also check for We can change the sprite to a projectile, a food, or an enemy, and MakeCode takes care of that for us. But this one is a player. Something we didn't do last week, but I think it's important to emphasize this week is we're going to name our sprites, rename this variable so that we can keep everything straight on the screen. So where it says set my sprite, click on the drop down list and rename the variable. So I'm going to rename mine to hero because this is the hero in our game. Click OK. And nothing should happen yet because we haven't actually created the character that we are using on this. And so what I want to do is I want to actually draw the character. And I do that by clicking this little gray square next to the sprite name. So this opens up. This is where the pixel art comes in and where we get to actually create our own character. So this character that we're making is going to be going around on the screen and grabbing the pizza that's moving around on the screen. So we want to draw a character that we think might go after pizza. The pizza will be drawn for us in a minute, and I'll show you how to do that. But we're going to draw our own character that we're going to use here initially. Okay, so what you need to do for that is choose a size for your pixel blocks. That's up in the left-hand corner. These squares of different sizes. Hey, Laura, thanks so much for joining in. Glad to see that you're checking out the live stream. We're going to create this character, and you need to choose a color that you would like for your character and choose a size that you'd want the block. So I'm going to make the default for this game, or kind of the example for this game, is sort of a smiley face looking Pac-Man character. That's something that you could make. I don't know. I'm just going to mess around with some pixel art and see what I end up creating. I like the fact that you can just change this and you can draw, and then now mine's looking like an anchor, looks like on the screen. You can go ahead and draw whatever you'd like on your background. Actually, I'm going to turn this into some face of some sort. I think it kind of mimicked a nose and mouth there. So I'll give you some time while I'm working on mine. You can work on yours. And wish there was an easier way for you guys to share what you're making, what character you're drawing right now, because it'd be really interesting to see some of the stuff that you guys are making right now while I'm working on mine. I'm going to add another square here. Have some orange eyes. Now, I don't need any comments about how it looks like me and matches my background color, my lights, and all that. We don't don't need that this afternoon. But so I'm making this small face. Try to make things symmetric. I kind of like that with the pixel art. We can make that pretty easily, get things symmetric on the screen. So once you have that drawn, once you've used the pixel creator, the different sizes, if you need to use the eraser, I didn't say that, but it's right here next to the pencil at the top. If you erase something, you can choose what size you want to erase as well. And I'm not erasing it now, but it'll show you what's gone before you click the mouse button with that. And then you can click done. That's down in the bottom right-hand corner. When you do that, your character should show up on the screen. So they're going to show up right in the middle of the screen. Notice the background color doesn't clash with my character. If it does clash with yours, you can change the background color really easily just by clicking on the blue, and you can change it to another one. That's what I was running into a couple of nights ago when I went through this, that it was matching one of my colors, and so it didn't show up very well on the screen as I was working through it. All right, so now we want to make this character move on the screen. Right now we've We've added the sprite to our game. Now we're going to make them move. The way that we're going to do that is using the controller blocks. And the very top one says move my sprite with buttons. And that's the one that we're going to use. We're going to drag it over and put it underneath of set my sprite. Now you'll notice that this doesn't do anything. And that's designed that way. And it's supposed to be this way. And we've got this little exclamation point next to our code block. Bring it back up here for you. All right, so remember we renamed our sprite earlier. And so we want to make sure that when we rename them, we're going to change this later on to match the one that we renamed. And this is actually really helpful, and it's a really good thing to do when you're coding, is to name your sprites, name your variables, name everything that you're using in a way that it's easy for you to understand later on. The computer doesn't care what we call our sprite. Okay, the computer is going to do what it's going to do, regardless of whether or not we can name it just some random thing, characters. We can put A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The computer doesn't care. Naming things is for our benefit, for others who are going to look at our code later on, for us to be able to track down bugs later on. All of naming something that's useful, that only helps us later on. So make sure that you're naming things so that when you go back to look at this later, you know exactly what the hero sprite is and what they're going to be doing. So, so now that we have these buttons, we've checked out we've renamed the sprite, we've matched the move with the sprite, we can now move our character on the screen. We can use either the joystick by dragging it with our mouse button over here, or we can use WASD, and that will make our character move around the screen. All right, so pretty easy to get a character that we've drawn and make them move quickly in Microsoft MakeCode. It takes care of a lot of things for us. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add the pizza to our game. And this sprite is actually not going to be one that we draw, but it's going to be one from the gallery. But we have to do the same thing that we did with the hero. So click on Sprites, set my sprite, and put it underneath of the move hero. And what kind of sprite are we going to be creating this time? What do you think that the type of this sprite is going to be on this particular sprite that we're making? And so I'm going to go ahead and rename it see if anybody has any ideas on what kind of sprite we're going to be making this time. I'm going to rename this variable to pizza so that we know what that is. And then we're going to change the kind for this sprite. And we are going to change it to food. All right, so we've renamed the sprite by clicking rename variable. We've changed the kind to food. I'll zoom in here just so you see everything that's going on my code. And now we're going to actually get a pixel art that's already in the gallery for the pizza. So go ahead and click on this square. Yeah, absolutely. It's food. There are several things that we're actually just going to be consuming the food as we go. And so that's why it's a food and not necessarily an enemy in this case. I know that they've got and I have maybe a good thing to go through next week is what each of those actually does and how the code behind handles that. But yeah, it's interesting that they have those set up that way. And so I may have to do a whole session on just what those do and what those do for you automatically in the code. Once we're creating the sprite for the pizza, go up to gallery. And here's a lot of characters already in this gallery. So this can give you some ideas later on if it maybe maybe pixel art isn't your thing. Maybe you don't want to draw your own characters. You can find some characters in this gallery. But I'm going to grab one of these slices of pizza at the top. So there's one that's right here and the one that's here. I'm going to grab the one next to the, actually the small pizza is the one I'm going to grab. The one that looks a little more pixelated because it's smaller and they've tried to expand it to fit in this gallery. And then I'm going to click done. And if you chose the big pizza, you'll probably notice that the pizza is much larger and it's covering your sprite. And it's okay if you chose the big pizza. That's up to you for which one that you chose. And so now we have a consumable on our screen. We have the food that we're going to take along the way, and we're going to add some code to tell us what happens when these sprites overlap with each other. And we talked about that a little bit last week. Overlap just means that one of these sprites is touching the other sprite. Okay, and we did that in Scratch by checking to see, we put it in a while loop or something, while not touching or touching sprite. In Microsoft MakeCode, there's an overlap event listener. So if we go to Sprites, scroll down, projectiles, overlaps. And we're going to take this very first overlap block and drag it out onto the screen. And this is going to go anywhere on the screen. Not inside of our function though. And you'll notice that these code blocks have these indentations that look like puzzle pieces, meaning that they'll go inside of another block. Whenever you have it's called an event listener. This is a big block of code, or a section that's sitting out here listening for this thing to happen, for the code to run inside of it. This doesn't have any indentations along the outside, meaning it can set anywhere on the screen and you don't have to plug it anywhere else. So what I want to do is say on sprite overlaps, on sprite of kind player overlaps other sprite of kind food. So this is setting that up. And why this is called an event listener, and they don't really use that terminology, but that's what it is, and that's what it is in other places, is because this block of code, this blue on, is setting out here, waiting the entire time until this thing happens. This sprite of kind player overlaps a sprite of kind food. And when that happens, the code inside of this is going to get executed for our game. So that's what we want to do. We're going to give ourselves some points when we overlap. That means we've grabbed the pizza and we have eaten it. And so info is where we store scoring for our game. So I'm going to do change score by 1. So whenever we overlap the pizza and it's taking off on us, you'll notice up in the top right-hand corner, your score is probably jumping way up, and you can move your character off of the pizza and your score will stop. But so this is saying on whenever the player is overlapping the food, change the score by 1. It's still overlapping it right now. And so this function is getting fired a lot, and this code's getting run a lot on our game. All right, so let's set the position for the pizza to random locations around the screen. We're going to make it show up and go other places on the screen, because right now it's just setting in one spot, easy to grab, and we don't want that to, this isn't quite a game if we're not actually moving it around and doing anything. So click on Sprites and set my sprite position to X and Y. All right, and you notice that my sprite has this exclamation point around it, and that means that it doesn't know what this variable is. We don't have anything in our game named this variable. All right. And so what we really want to do is we want to use this other sprite in this function header, because it's saying whenever a sprite of kind player overlaps another other sprite of kind food, do this stuff. But this, we know that this other sprite is the food. And so I'm going to drag it down and put it inside of the set position. And then you can just get rid of my sprite. You can also change it directly to pizza as well if you'd like to change it there. It won't make any difference in this game. This only comes into play later on if you have multiple versions of the pizza on the screen at the same time. We need to know which pizza we're moving. So if, say we added 50 pizzas on the screen and we wanted to make sure the one that we ate is disappearing and not all of them at once, then we would absolutely have to use what I just did here. Otherwise, for right now, you can just change this drop down to pizza if you'd like to do that. Either one is fine for the game that we're making today. All right, so we're going to use some math. We're going to choose a random spot. So click math. And there's a pick random, 0 to 10. I want to drag 2 of these out there, one for the X and one for the Y value in our position. So as you move it closer, there's one in X. Click on math again, and one in Y. So the X and the Y values correspond to where we're at on this arcade screen. Remember, X is left and right, and Y is up and down. And where it can get tricky sometimes with games is you have to know where they start, where they reference. So for instance, Scratch is the center of the screen is 0, 0. But for MakeCode, 0, 0 is up in the left-hand corner. So it really just depends on which environment that you're using, whether or not where that starting position of X of 0 and Y of 0 is located. So the arcade game is 160 pixels wide total and 120 pixels high. So we're going to make sure that we want our pizza to move around within those parameters. So your X values need to be 10 to 160, and your Y's need to be 10 to 120. Okay, and so that's making it move around the screen. Every time that we overlap with the pizza. All right, so I'm going to type these numbers into the comments just so that you'll have you'll have those if you need to reference them. Okay, and so that should make your character move around the screen. If we stop and restart it, one of the things that we may notice is that right away we start getting points, which probably isn't something that we want. It means that up in this on start, our pizza is going to be randomly positioned, or is going to be set on the middle of the screen right where our character's at. So it's automatically going to overlap our character right away and then go to a random position. So what I want to do is I want to set the position up here in the start as well to a random position. So I'm going to go to Sprites, set my sprite position. I'm going to change it here from my sprite to pizza. And I'm going to just choose a spot on the screen. And I can do this by moving my see my X and Y. If I choose these values, I can choose where the pizza is going to show up initially. I'm going to go right down in the right-hand corner, just so it's away from my character, and I won't get a point for it right away. Every now and then, it will choose a random spot where your character is, and you'll get double points, but for the most part, it should be moving around on you the whole time. Like that. All right, so next we're going to start a countdown timer. So this countdown timer is really what makes this an actual game. Otherwise, we're just moving around on the screen and grabbing a pizza. We don't have any goal along the way. So go to info, and there is a start countdown. And right now it's at 10 seconds. So you can try it. Once you hit the pizza, you've got 10 seconds to actually grab the pizza again. Otherwise, you lose. But I found that 10 seconds is actually really easy, and it's not really much of a challenge. So I'm going to change it to 5, which might make it a little bit more difficult. And you can change that number to whatever you want. Just know that when you grab the pizza the first time, you've got 5 seconds to get to it again, or something's going to happen. I'm going to stop it for a moment. So we have the timer. We're overlapping with our pizza. We're getting points when we grab the pizza. Last but not least, let's add a game over screen just to make this a full, complete game. So if we check in info, in countdown, there's something that says on countdown end. That means that our timer has expired and got down to 0. On countdown end, let's see what we want to do with that. We could actually give ourselves some health here and then lose health along the way. Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, this will automatically end for us if will automatically show a game over screen if the timer ends. So we won't have to do that. Nope, it did not. Okay, so on countdown end, click on game, and then go to game over, and you can go to lose or win, but we're going to leave it on lose. So on countdown end, whenever we get the final timer, the countdown has ended. In game, there's a block that's called game over. So now, if I don't get to the pizza in time, it gives me a game over, new high score, and tells me to hit A to reset. That's already handled for us by MakeCode, which is really, really interesting to have that. 4, 3. All right. So we have that countdown in, game over, lose. I'm going to do this real quickly. Let's make it so that if you have over 20 points, maybe you win the game. So maybe a different screen shows up. It'll keep up with the high score, but I'm just to bring in some of the logic blocks that exist in Microsoft MakeCode. So go into logic, if, then. So what condition are we checking in this case? What has to be true in order for us to get a game over screen that says that you win? And in that case, we're going to do some math. And I think we're going to use a greater than. Bring this back in here. Logic. Oh, it's in the comparison. I'm still finding my way around some as we go as well. So I'm going to drag over this second one that looks like less than. So if info score is greater than, remember the alligator's mouth opens towards the side that's greater than, and the score is greater than 20. I'm gonna do game over, and game over, and you win. Otherwise, you game over and you lost. Let's see if I can get 20 points real quick and show you that the screen shows up differently. Now let it go. Oh, over 20. There we go. My logic said greater than 20. So I wanted to make sure I had 20 there. So we get a different screen. It's showing up. We've got confetti dropping. We've won the game. Awesome. All right. So hopefully this was helpful. We touched on a few other things with MakeCode today. Make sure that you name your sprites, you name all of your variables, something that's useful on your game. It's not for the computer that you name it something useful. The computer doesn't care. It's for you or anybody else looking at your code later on when you're doing that. We also checked into some logic with the if statements inside of MakeCode. And if you're watching this, not live, but checking out later on, hopefully this worked well for you, that you were able to create something interesting in MakeCode. MakeCode is a really good tool to start out with coding because we are working through the logical steps of building something from scratch. And that's all that coding is. When I'm coding professionally, I'm typing much of this out, but I'm doing the same thing every time that I'm doing inside of something like MakeCode. And got a question, how do I make it so the hero won't go off the screen? Good question. We'll go ahead and answer that real quickly here before we get off. I know that we did that last week, and what's really handy in MakeCode, and this is a newer tool to me as well, and so I'm checking out what I can use the search block at the top when I think about something that I want to happen in the game, and it'll give me the blocks that are related to it. So I'm typing in screen because I want my character to stay on the screen. And this block comes up. It says set my sprite stay in screen to on. And I want to drag that over into the on start block. But remember, our hero, we need to change this my sprite to hero. Stay in screen is on or off. So now when you play, your character will not go outside of the boundaries of the screen because of this one code block that we've got up here. All right, any other questions before we get ready to wrap up today? Anything else you'd like me to try or that you didn't understand along the way? Again, we're building this framework. You're building some understanding of what we do and how we're going to code things. And that makes it easy to transition to other languages. Scratch and MakeCode won't be out forever. There will always be new tools in coding to try something. So it's really important to understand the concepts behind it more so than every specific block that you're going to use along the way, because that can change. And who knows what programming languages will be like in the future. So, all right, if that is it, thank you guys so much for joining in this afternoon. Next week, we are going to continue into MakeCode. And then in the final week of May, we are going to give away a BrainPad Arcade. So it's a small handheld device that you can actually download your MakeCode games to. I've got one right here on my desk. This guy. So we're going to give it away to somebody tuning in our live stream for the last one in May, and we'll do a random drawing and give one of those out. So that way you can download your games onto this device and actually play it in your hands instead of trying to move it around on a computer screen. But that's it today. Thank you guys so much for joining in. Have fun coding, create something awesome. I know that you guys are going to be the problem solvers of the future, and I'm glad to be able to join in and maybe give some guidance along the way with this world of coding. So again, thanks, and we will see you next week. Bye.